Hello and welcome. If you're preparing for the UPSC, you know there are some thinkers you just cannot skip. And Max Weber is right at the top of that list. His ideas aren't just for the Sociology Optional. They pop up everywhere, in general studies, especially in ethics and governance. So in this session, we're going to do a really thorough exam-focused revision of his core concepts. We'll break them down in a way that's easy to remember and, more importantly, easy to apply in your answers.
So what's our roadmap for today? Well, we'll start at the very beginning, with Weber's unique toolkit for studying society, his methodology. From there, we'll move to the core building block of his whole system, the concept of social action. Then, we'll look at his big picture ideas on power, social structure, and bureaucracy, and of course, his famous study on capitalism. We'll wrap everything up by looking at his incredible legacy and some of the important critiques of his work. Let's get started.
All right, let's dive right in. To really get a grip on Weber's conclusions, we have to first understand the tools he used to get there. You see, he didn't just pick a side in the academic debates of his time. He actually created his own unique methodological framework that brilliantly brought different ideas together.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Back then, there was a huge debate. On one side, you had the positivists. They believed sociology should be like a natural science, studying only what you can see and observe. But on the other side, the anti-positivists argued that humans are different. Our actions are driven by internal meanings and motives, and you have to interpret those. Weber's solution was just brilliant. He said sociology has to do both. You have to observe the action, sure, but you also have to interpret the subjective meaning behind it. This synthesis is a core concept for your mains answers.
And that brings us to his first key tool, Verstehen. It's a German word, and it basically means interpretive understanding. The easiest way to think about it is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. For Weber, a sociologist can't just be an outside observer. You have to try and understand the motives and meanings behind an action from the actor's own point of view. This is what truly separates social science from natural science.
The second crucial tool is the ideal type. Now, this is a very high-yield topic for UPSC, so let's be super clear. An ideal type is not what is perfect or morally ideal. It's not reality itself. Think of it as a mental construct, a kind of pure model or a measuring rod. What the sociologist does is take the most essential features of a social phenomenon and accentuates them to create this pure concept, which can then be used to compare and analyze the real world.
Let's make that a bit more concrete. Say you want to study democracy. How would you use an ideal type? Well, first you'd select what you think are its most essential traits, things like a multi-party system, universal franchise, free and fair elections. Then you logically sharpen and accentuate these traits to form a pure concept of democracy. This model then becomes your benchmark. You can use it to look at a real-world democracy like India's and see where it aligns with the ideal type and where it deviates.
And the final piece of his toolkit is value freedom, or Wertfreiheit. This was an absolutely crucial principle for Weber. He insisted that sociologists, when they're acting as scientists, must keep their personal beliefs, their politics, their values completely out of their analysis. The job is to describe the world as it is, not to prescribe how it should be. This fundamental separation of fact and value is key to objectivity, and it's a concept you'll definitely see again in your GS Paper 4 ethics exam.
So, let's do a quick micro-revision on his method. It's really built on three key pillars. First, Verstehen, for that deep, interpretive understanding. Second, ideal types, those mental models we use as measuring rods. And third, value freedom, to ensure scientific objectivity. If you can remember these three, you've got his methodology down.
Okay, so we have Weber's tools. Now let's look at what he actually studied with them. For Weber, the most fundamental unit of society, the absolute building block of everything else, is what he called social action.
You can see this right in Weber's own definition of sociology. Look at the two key parts of this quote. First, the interpretive understanding of social action. That's Verstehen, which we just covered. And second, a causal explanation of its course and effect. So it's not enough to just understand the meaning. The goal is also to explain why things happen the way they do.
So how did Weber analyze social action? Well, he developed 4 ideal types. And this table here is absolutely critical, especially for prelims. First up, we have Zweck-rational or goal-rational action. This is all about logic and efficiency. You have a goal, and you rationally calculate the best means to achieve it. An engineer building a bridge is the perfect example. Second, there's Wertrational or value-rational action. Here, the action is driven by a deep-seated value, like honor, duty, or religion. Think of a captain choosing to go down with their ship. It's not the most efficient choice, but it's driven by a powerful value. Third, we have effective action. This is simple. It's driven by your emotions in the moment. And fourth is traditional action. This is behavior guided by habit or custom. You do it simply because it's always been done that way. A key point from Weber is that modern society is becoming more and more dominated by that first type, goal-rational action.
Let's just pause for a second and lock that in because it's so fundamental. Social action is any behavior that has a subjective meaning for the person doing it and is oriented towards others. Weber gives us 4 ideal types to classify it: goal-rational, value-rational, affective, and traditional. Understanding these 4 is really the key to unlocking the rest of his theories.
All right, so from the micro level of individual action, we're now scaling up to the macro level structures of society, things like power and inequality. And this is where Weber really gives us a much more detailed and nuanced picture compared to the purely economic focus of a thinker like Karl Marx.
Weber makes a very important distinction between power and authority. Authority for him is legitimate power. It's power that people accept as right and just. He asks, why do people obey? And he gives us 3 ideal types based on the answer. First, there's traditional authority, which rests on a belief in long-standing customs. Think of a king or a queen. Second is charismatic authority, which comes from the extraordinary, almost magnetic personality of a single leader, like a prophet or a great revolutionary. And finally, there's rational legal authority. This is based on a belief in impersonal rules and laws. This last one is the foundation of all modern states and bureaucracy.
Now, this is a really big one for Mainz, so listen closely. When it comes to social stratification, or inequality, Weber argued it's not just about money. He saw it as having 3 distinct dimensions. First, you have class, which is your economic position, your life chances in the marketplace. Then you have status, which is about social honor and prestige. It's linked to your lifestyle and how others see you. And finally, you have party, which is all about the organized pursuit of power. This class-status-party framework is a classic Weberian concept and a powerful critique of any purely economic view of society.
So, to wrap this section up, authority is power that people see as legitimate, and it comes in 3 flavors: traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. And social inequality is not just one thing. It happens along 3 different lines: economic class, social status, and political party. Make sure you can clearly explain the difference between each of these.
We just talked about rational legal authority. Well, now we're going to look at its purest organizational form, bureaucracy. For Weber, the unstoppable spread of bureaucracy is a core part of a much bigger historical process he called rationalization, the growing dominance of goal-rational thinking in all areas of life. He saw this as a double-edged sword. It's incredibly efficient, but also dangerous, potentially trapping us in what he famously called an iron cage. So what does this ideal bureaucracy look like? Weber laid out its key features. There's a clear hierarchy of authority. Everyone knows who their boss is. There are fixed and official duties for every position. Management is based on written files. The paper trail is everything. Officials are selected based on expert training and technical competence. And, crucially, they apply rules impersonally, without personal feelings getting in the way. Every single one of these features is designed for one thing and one thing only: maximum technical efficiency. This topic is incredibly relevant for GS Paper 2 on governance and Paper 4 on ethics. But this leads to a really important question. While the ideal type is designed for perfect efficiency, does it actually work that way in the real world? Or does the very structure of bureaucracy, with all its rules and hierarchies, end up creating its own set of unique problems?
And of course, there are major critiques. The sociologist Robert K. Merton, for example, talked about its dysfunctions. He pointed out that the obsession with rules can lead to inflexibility, what we call red tape, and that strict impersonality can create a lot of friction with the public. From a Marxian perspective, the critique is different. They argue that bureaucracy is never a neutral tool. In a capitalist society, it will always end up serving the interests of the ruling class. These are really valuable points for a balanced Mainz answer.
Okay, quick recap on bureaucracy. At its heart, it is the organizational form of rational legal authority. The ideal type is built on hierarchy, rules, and impersonality, all for the sake of efficiency. But for a complete answer, you have to remember the critiques, that it can lead to dysfunctions like red tape, and that it can be seen as a tool for class domination.
We now arrive at what is probably Weber's most famous and maybe most controversial work. The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism is a powerful argument about the role that ideas can play in shaping economic history. It was, and still is, seen as a direct challenge to purely materialist explanations of change, like those of traditional Marxism.
So let's break down his very specific argument. Weber laid out this fascinating causal chain. He argued that certain ethics found within some Protestant sects, especially Calvinism, helped to create a unique mindset, what he called the spirit of capitalism. Now, this spirit wasn't about greed. It was about seeing the systematic, rational pursuit of profit as a moral duty, a calling. This, in turn, created the psychological motivation for people to work hard, save, and reinvest their money. And when this new mindset combined with the right material conditions, well, that's what lit the fuse for the explosion of modern capitalism in the West.
So what were these specific religious ideas? First, there was the Calvinist doctrine of predestination. This was the stressful belief that God had already decided who was going to heaven and who wasn't. This created a lot of anxiety, and people looked for signs that they were among the elect. Success in your worldly calling or profession came to be seen as such a sign. Second, you have this worldly asceticism. This meant you were encouraged to work hard and accumulate wealth, but you were forbidden from spending it on luxuries or worldly pleasures. So what do you do with the money? The only logical thing was to reinvest it back into your business, which directly fueled capitalist growth.
Let's summarize this crucial thesis, and please be very careful with the nuance here. Weber never said that Protestantism caused capitalism. That's a common oversimplification. He argued that its values created a spirit, a particular psychological drive for rational profit-seeking. This is an argument for causal pluralism, the idea that both ideas and material conditions were necessary for modern capitalism to take off.
All right, in our final section, let's take a step back and assess Weber's incredible legacy. While his contributions are absolutely foundational to sociology, his work has also faced some very significant scholarly criticism, and it's essential to know both sides for a well-rounded perspective.
So what are the main arguments against Weber's ideas? While his method of Verstehen has often been criticized for being too subjective, how can you really verify that you've understood someone's motives correctly? His ideal types have also been critiqued for not having a clear systematic method for how they're constructed. His famous Protestant ethic thesis has been challenged by historians who point to early forms of capitalism that existed in Catholic areas. And finally, many find his vision of the iron cage to be deeply pessimistic, offering no real hope or alternative to the endless march of rationalization. So to quickly summarize our assessment, Weber's work is absolutely foundational, but it's not without its critics. He's challenged on grounds of subjectivity and some historical interpretations. And yet his legacy is just immense. He basically founded interpretive sociology, gave us the powerful analytical tool of the ideal type, and his analysis of rationalization and bureaucracy remains more relevant than ever today.
And now for one final complete revision recap of everything. When you think of Weber's methodology, remember these key words: Verstehen, ideal types, and value freedom. His core concept is social action and its 4 types. His theory of stratification is 3-dimensional: class, status, party. His theory of authority also has 3 types: traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. His grand theory of modernity is defined by rationalization, leading to bureaucracy and the iron cage. And finally, his key thesis connects the Protestant ethic to the spirit of modern capitalism. I hope this structured revision gives you a solid framework for understanding Max Weber and helps you confidently tackle any question on him in your exam. Thank you for joining me.